I'm in the 2021 Civic Type R, and we're going to compare it back to back with a brand new 23, see if it's really worth the money to upgrade, and I think the results might actually surprise you. Quick refresher on the specs. This, of course, is a 2-liter engine. It is turbocharged. It makes 306 horsepower and 295 pound-feet of torque. And of course, it has made it to a 6-speed manual transmission. Only way you can get it, thank you Honda, driving the front wheels only, and it has got a helical limited slip differential. Now, this last generation came with 20-inch wheels and tires. This particular car has 265s, but they are Michelin all season. That's really the only difference here, and this is as close to a completely stock car as I could get. So that said, let's go for a drive, and then we're going to compare the interior. We're going to look at the handling and all the things that might make you consider upgrading to a new 23, or should you stick with something like this and maybe try to find an FK8 used. Let's talk about it. They say it never rains in California. However, it is an atmospheric river coming through here today. So that's not going to stop us because we're going to drive this car in real world conditions. We're not doing any 0 to 60s. And I've got auto rev matching turned on, which is a little bit difficult to find in here. And then I'm going to try it off and just give you my impressions compared to the new car. So I'm going to do this drive in sport mode or sport plus. It has the stiffest suspension setting. This, of course, has adaptive dampers in it. And as you go up in the modes, I think you get a little bit more leeway in terms of your slip angle. And let's just see how this puts the power down once I hit it here. Okay. There is a little bit of rev hang, I will give you that. What I love about these cars is they just feel so solid. It's been a while since I've driven one of these, and there's that rev match. And man, when you hop in them, you just feel like this is a really hooked up, really dialed in car. It feels like it's built like a bank vault. It has this real feeling of solidity, and part of that is due to the steering, which of course is excellent in this car. Honda has one of the best feeling steering systems right now at any price point, and especially in the sub $50,000 price point, which this is. Steering feel is really, really superb. It's excellent, and that is one of the things that gives you this feeling how the car is just built like a piece of metal and it's been milled down to the actual car that you're driving, if that makes any kind of sense at all. So hit the gas a little bit. There is a little hint of turbo lag once you get off the boost. I think we're going to find that in the new car too. And even though it's raining today, I feel like this car gives me a lot of confidence. This is a very easy car to drive. Man, that rev match is really, really quite good. And actually, I've got a fair bit of grip here. Let's see if I can put down the power coming out of this corner. Indeed, I can. So the traction control system is doing a just fine job of putting down the power today in these pretty terrible conditions. Oh yeah. Oh yeah, I forgot how much I love driving these cars. So much communications with the steering. Let's get a little run here. Listen to how good that engine sounds. Of course, in sport mode, the exhaust valve is open. I guess it's just one valve. Let's go to R+, see if it gets any louder. I'm not sure if that makes a difference. Coming up to a sweeping right-hander here. And it just kind of hooks up and goes, even though I blew that downshift. Oh yeah. Man, so much confidence, so much good stuff happening in this car. The Honda engineers have really worked on the suspension. They've really dialed it in. This is a car that you can tell has had a lot of development time for enthusiasts. So it's something that really is so easy to drive. Even in inclement weather like this, I feel like I know what the car is going to do. I feel like I'm not going to get into trouble driving like this. Honda has got a very clever system in here to reduce torque steer. And torque steer is when you're on power hard, and some cars will tend to pull to the right or the left depending on the road surface. And Honda has put together this system. It's called a dual axis front suspension, and it's very clever, and it really does do an amazing job of reducing torque steer to an absolute minimum. If you're okay with front wheel drive, I think these Hondas are probably some of the best cars you can really experience for a high performance front wheel drive vehicle. I love how this car has such a sporty nature. It's really an enthusiast car. Honda has put in the work, they've put in the effort to make this a real driver's car, but you feel safe while you're driving. You feel like this thing is just on easy mode the whole time. It feels like it's very difficult to make a terrible mistake in this car. And I'm sure some people have, if you go over your personal limits. But man, this car just feels so planted. It feels so dialed. It's so responsive, and it really does have some character that is kind of missing in other cars, which have just been sort of toned down a little bit. This really has everything an enthusiast is looking for. Oh, and by the way, the steering wheel is great too. Now the gauges, not that great. There's not a problem with them, but compared to the new one, which we'll talk about in a minute, this definitely feels a little bit older. This car feels a little bit more claustrophobic too, because the center console feels higher. I feel like I'm in a little bit more of a cocoon, even though the amount of space is about the same. Now these seats are excellent. They're grippy, they're supportive. The side bolstering is really high. They really hold you in on corners, and I like the shoulder bolsters up here too. They really put you firmly in the seat, so you feel like you've got the confidence to attack the corners in this car. And I think that's what the Honda engineers want you to do. I think they want you to attack corners. Now we're in the 2023, the FL5 version of the Type R, and there are some significant differences here, starting with the price. The FK8 that my friend purchased for $39,000, now to get in the door for this new one, you're looking at about $44,000, so that is a pretty big bump up. We're making a whole 9 horsepower more at 315 now compared to 306, and we're going from 295 pound-feet of torque to 310, so we get a 15 pound-feet bump. Honda says that this engine now flows better, and it also has a revised exhaust. I think it's a bit louder. We'll listen to that in a second. This also has an improved cooling system, because if you're a track head like me, that's important. And I know in the FK8, there definitely was some overheating issues on track. I'm not going to drive this on track today, unfortunately, but we'll see over the coming months if this is actually, if the cooling system really is better. This has a stiffer body structure, which Honda says allows them to make a more refined vehicle. They've also improved the steering feel, which I think is a good thing because it was awfully good before. They say they have upgraded the brakes a little bit. Not quite sure what that means, but we're probably not going to be testing that today. And now we have 4 driving modes instead of 3 with the addition of individual. It's very BMW-like. You can vary the throttle, you can vary how much steering boost you're getting or how little boost you're getting, and also the suspension, things like that. But today we're going to be driving mainly in comfort and sport. Now Honda has wisely decided to go with 19-inch wheels and tires instead of the 20-inch that they had before, and I think that's good because you've got more tire choice in 19 inches. And they've also increased the section width, so now these are 265s. These are Michelin Pilot Sport 4S, not the cup tires. They're still pretty grippy. So let's head out into the Avatar Way of the Water world today. It is quite wet, quite rainy, but you know, let's just pretend we're in the UK. Let's see what traction is like today. It's getting worse. I can verify that. I think the sound in here is a little bit better. I think the exhaust is a little louder. Let's see. So I've turned off auto rev matching. Let's see how it works. I can heel and tow a little better in this car than I could with the other one. So the pedal box placement is a little better. Let's try it again. Yes, that's what I like. So these tires are not the biggest fan of what's going on today in the rain. I've definitely done a little hydroplaning before I got on camera. That was kind of interesting. The steering in here is amazingly a little bit better than the last generation. It seems like it's got a little bit less boost and just a little bit more feel in it than before, and I definitely appreciate that. Also, the range of steering selectability seems to be a little bit wider too. When you're in comfort mode, I think there's a little bit more boost than the last gen, and when you're in full-on R Plus mode, which I'll stick it into, there is a little bit less boost going on, which means you get even more feel. So the steering feels a little bit heavier. It's actually fairly heavy for a EPS system. Ah, perfect rev match. Love that, love that. Let's see how the power is getting out of the corner here. Okay, not so much grip, really. And this ride in R Plus is, it's quite stiff, let's put it that way. Plus R, excuse me. Quite stiff indeed. But I love the sounds this engine makes. And the steering, you can kind of feel it grabbing for traction, like little nibbles on the pavement trying to find the traction cheese like a mouse. Does that make sense? That makes no sense at all to me. But I thought it was an interesting analogy. So power comes on quite strong in this. I'd like to say the power seems to ramp up a little bit faster, but I'm not entirely sure. Yeah, lots of feel in the steering. I like that. And the chassis definitely feels stiffer. You can really feel that Honda has done their homework. Let's go to comfort mode here to make things a little bit more buttoned down. And that's sort of my impression of this car. It does feel a little bit more buttoned down in the last one. It feels a little bit more civilized. I feel there is more refinement going on in here. It's like a fine Swiss watch. So let's say the last generation was kind of an Omega. This is a little bit more like a Rolex. We're talking about a 5% improvement in refinement. And who can complain about that? It definitely is more refined. I think there's a little bit more feel in this car, despite the fact that we have more refinement. I get really good driver involvement. This car also wants to egg me on. And I feel like I'm getting more communication from the car as to what's going on than the last one. And believe me, the FK was excellent. It's excellent in that regard. It's not like I'm putting down that car at all, because it is superb. This is just superber, if I can invent such a word. Apparently I just did. Let's see what the brakes are like. Yeah, I mean, wet road. Who can complain about that? Now, putting down power, clearly it's a super wet day. It's getting wetter. The all seasons were actually a little bit better. This tends to spin the front tires. I guess that's what we got today, but that is due to that big wall of torque. Now, this transmission is really good, and I thought the last one was excellent too, but somehow Honda has made this 5% better than the last one. The gear selection is more precise. It feels very, I wouldn't even use the word notchy, but it just goes into position exactly where you want it. This is truly one of the very best manual gearboxes available today. Not that there's a whole lot left, but this is a superb manual gearbox by any stretch. And the FK was a superb gearbox, but there's a little bit less play in this one and just a little bit more precision. This is very, very good indeed. In terms of the hierarchy of Miata and BRZ in this, for front-wheel drive, this is absolutely the best. I think the Miata gearbox is a little bit better than this one, but I'd say Miata, I'd say Type R, and then I'd say GR86 in terms of gearbox feel, if you're a gearbox junkie like I am. I do like the sight lines on here. Everything is big and open, and I really like this new cabin quite a bit too. And these seats, they are quite bright, they are quite red, and I feel like I'm getting excellent bolstering down around my thighs. Up here around my shoulders, I think it might not be quite as much. I'm gonna have to jump between the cars again to see the difference there. But these are very, very good seats indeed. And this is a very confidence-inspiring car. It seems like this is the kind of car that just pushes you harder and harder to drive quicker and quicker. And that's what I think is the hallmark of a really good car. I know pretty much every Porsche I've driven feels like that too. Let me put it back in R plus R. Plus R, it's too much. The suspension is too stiff, except for basically a race surface. The car is getting jostled around, and you can feel the balance is getting a little bit upset. It is not really what you want on the street, and everything feels a little bit tighter, a little bit stiffer. You can feel that this body structure is really, really quite good. It's a work of art. It's very, very stiff. Downshift. Ah, yes. Pedal box placement, definitely better. So overall, this shifting experience, in my opinion, is a significant improvement because I can heel and toe without any issue at all. They've made a little bit more space for my heel over the accelerator pedal, and that's really good. And if you don't know how to heel and toe, you should definitely go learn, because it is one of the things that makes driving a manual gearbox so pleasurable. I can't recommend it enough. If you're a new manual driver, I would definitely recommend this car. There's nothing to be afraid of with this car. And for the money, which is a lot more money, you're getting a lot of car here. This really feels like a pretty big step up from something like the GR86. So I think what we need to do next is go talk about practicality, check out the interior, and see which one might be better on a daily basis. The interior is where these cars really separate. So I'm sitting in the FK8 right now. It's a very nice interior, it's very serviceable, but it definitely feels a bit more cramped, and that's because these pillars from the center console come farther out into the car, and so I feel like it's more cockpit-like, so it doesn't feel as airy or as bright, even though dimensionally it's very similar. Now these seats are quite good. I think actually these have a little bit more shoulder support. I'll tell you in a second when I hop in the other car. The steering wheel is really good. The seating position is really good. I spoke about the pedal box earlier. It's definitely not as good in this car, harder to heel toe. And the instrument panel is perfectly serviceable. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just not updated and modern. And overall, this just feels a little bit cheaper, a little bit lower rent. And what I like about these cars is that they are eminently practical. I'm sitting in the back seat, sitting behind myself. I've got a fair bit of headroom here, probably 5 inches to go, and I'm 5'9". This new interior is a revelation. It's night and day over the FK8. This is so spacious. I've got so much room here. It feels big and open and airy, and that's because the center console doesn't jut up in front of me like this. It feels lower. And of course, you've got this really clean, elegant new dashboard design. You have a large LED display in front of the driver. It's over 10 inches. You've got a nice center display as well. And these seats are super comfortable. There's a lot of red in here, I got to admit, but this cabin just feels modern. It feels airy, it feels open, and I think it is the biggest difference between this generation and the last. What makes the Civic such a practical all-around car is the amount of space that you get in the hatch area. This is one of the largest hatches available on the market, if not the largest. Now in the back seat, it's really more of the same. I've got plenty of headroom, but I actually have a little bit more knee room here because what Honda has done is they've pushed the back seat back ever so slightly to give me a little bit more knee room, and it's plenty spacious back here. I've got the 60/40 folding split right now because I've got some luggage in the back. So when you're cruising around your neighborhood and you're getting ready to go to your Pilates class, you're going to go to the gym, you're going to go to Whole Foods, whatever it is, the PTA meeting, this is a car that doesn't scream, I'm an offender, I'm going to do some street racing, and I'm going to take out some obstacles. No, this is a car that's a little bit more subtle than the last generation. It's not loud, pretty quiet. I've got it in comfort mode. You can hear the exhaust is not objectionable, and the ride quality and comfort is firm. It's pretty stiff, but it's not overly stiff, and it's not harsh. And I think that's gonna basically do it for most people. If you want to get into boy racer mode, just put it in sport or plus R. Everything stiffens up, the exhaust gets louder, and the car beeps at you. The biggest difference between the FK8 and this new generation is the exterior and the interior design. This is vastly cleaner, it's more simplified. It's basically Gundam Man versus Salaryman. If you're cruising around that Whole Foods parking lot, you're not going to get a lot of attention from this car except for people in the know. The powertrain in both these cars is excellent, and with the bigger turbo and 315 horsepower, Honda says this is now the most powerful production car they've ever brought to the US. So is this new generation FL5 better than the last generation? Well, dynamically, it's better in every respect, but I'd say only about 5% better. That means that the last generation is so good, it's really hard to improve upon at this price point. If you have the FK8 and you're itching to upgrade, you got some money burning a hole in your pocket, by all means go ahead. Just know that dynamically, the cars are not that different. Yes, the chassis is lighter, there is better motion control, the ride quality is better, the steering is definitely a notch up, the transmission is a notch up too. All these things kind of add up, but it's really going to be up to you to decide if you want to spend that extra money. If you can find one without dealer markup, and that's going to be kind of a problem nowadays. Now, if you're looking for a track car that can kind of do it all, this is probably going to be a better choice because I understand that there is an improved and revised cooling system in that car, which is definitely going to help it not overheat on track like the FK8 is kind of well known for. But let's be honest, if you're going to be going to the track a lot, you probably want a dedicated track car anyhow, probably something that is a relatively affordable run, like a GR86 or maybe a Miata. And if you're thinking about the competition, you've got the Hyundai Elantra N, which is very good, but you've got the dealer network to deal with. You've got the GR Corolla, which is fantastic, but it's a limited production car, and frankly, it is much smaller than this, so it's not nearly as practical. And then you've got the Golf R and the Golf GTI, which are much more oriented on the luxury side, and again, they are much smaller cars. There's another video on performance cars right here. Go ahead and click it. Thanks for watching.